Should you be eating breakfast? When should you eat breakfast? And what type of breakfast is the best to boost your metabolism? These are questions I get asked all the time as a dietitian, and there is so much conflicting info out there. So today I'm dishing out my top strategies on how to boost your metabolism with breakfast if you're in your 40s and beyond. These tips have helped my clients get insane results, and I'm going to be sharing them with you today so you can benefit too. Definitely stay until the end because I'm going to be sharing a very specific formula I use to build out the perfect breakfast for my clients. Let's dive in. Hey, it's May. I'm a functional medicine dietitian. I love helping men and women over 40 look and feel their best by optimizing their metabolism, hormones, and health span. This is the channel to be watching if you want the science and strategies behind looking and feeling your best. And if you haven't already, definitely download my must-have food guide below. All right, so the first question I get asked is, should I even be eating breakfast? Now, back in the late 19th century, John Harvey Kellogg, a physician, coined the phrase, breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Now, judging by his last name, he might have had some ulterior motives for being so gung-ho about breakfast. Fast forward till today though, we have people all the rage skipping breakfast as part of time-restricted eating, which is a form of intermittent fasting. And everyone and their mother, including my patients, my friends, my family, even my dentist and his wife, come to me happily reporting that they've lost weight and changed their metabolism by skipping breakfast. Now, it's not all peaches and cream because I definitely have had a lot of clients who are skipping breakfast, backloading calories, eating way more snacks, not getting on top of their hunger cues, and eating super late at night. So, what is the science behind breakfast? And is it good? Is it bad? What is it? All right, so let's talk a little bit about hormones and rhythms. We know that everything in our body runs on a rhythm. We have a circadian rhythm, and the outside external cues give us a way to sync our rhythms to the natural rhythms. Now, these kinds of cues involve light and dark. They can also involve social cues. We call these cues Zeitgebers, which means time giver, coined by a German biologist, Jürgen Aschoff. So the bottom line is breaking our overnight fast, aka breakfast. But if we skip breakfast, we're actually missing a very important cue that's syncing our rhythm, and we can get into something called social circadian rhythm jet lag. Let me just mention a few studies here that showed some of the negative side effects of possibly skipping breakfast. There was a study that looked retroactively at data from the Mexican teachers cohort of over 66,000 women, all over age 20. And they found that out of everyone, 25, a quarter of the participants ate breakfast consistently. 18% of all women ended up gaining over 11 pounds in a 3-year period. And when they looked at just the ones that ate breakfast consistently, there was 7% less weight gain than in everyone else. So when they compared the breakfast eaters to the non-breakfast eaters and who gained weight and who didn't, it turns out the prevalence of gaining more than 11 pounds was actually 7% less in the people who were eating consistent breakfast compared to those that weren't. Another prospective study just published at the end of 2023 looked at over 103,000 people. Almost 80% of them were women. The average mean age was 42 years old. They looked at incidences of heart attack and stroke and compared that to habits of eating. What they found was super interesting. Both men and women who ate breakfast later than 9 a.m. or dinner later than 9 p.m. had increased risk of heart attack and stroke, but in women specifically, the risk was higher. So that's super interesting that there was a gender difference. If you're over 40 and female, it may be more important for you to eat breakfast before 9 a.m. than your male counterpart. The interesting thing about this study too is that the number of meals you ate during the day didn't increase or decrease risk. What did decrease risk was the amount of time between dinner and bedtime. So you actually had less of a risk if you had a longer time between dinner and bedtime. When they adjusted for chronotypes based on sleep surveys, they also found a decreased risk for those who were night owls. I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But all of this is to say, even though I've seen amazing results with intermittent fasting, my honest opinion, based on the literature, is that time-restricted eating works best for people who are moving dinner earlier, not people who are moving breakfast later or skipping breakfast. Ideally, whenever you wake up, you want to be eating breakfast within 2 hours of waking. If you have major adrenal issues, you want to eat breakfast even within within 1 hour of waking to help you lower cortisol. Now, the next question I get asked is there ever a time where eating breakfast too early is bad for you? And I would say yes, possibly. If you're one of those people whose circadian rhythm is off and you're eating breakfast off from your natural rhythms, it potentially is a mismatch as well. And the classic example are you overachievers out there who are waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning when metabolically and genetically you're more of a night owl, but in order to be productive, you're shifting your schedule super early and you're eating breakfast way earlier than you normally would if you were sleeping in. Those are times when we might be getting into some trouble. Now, there's not a gene for being a night owl, but there is a gene, which is super interesting, called MTNR1B. And it is a gene related to melatonin. And it turns out the people who have SNPs related to this gene make more melatonin later in the day and it sticks around longer. Those people are actually twice as likely to get gestational diabetes. Ding, ding, ding. That's me. But those people also are at increased risk of diabetes if their sleep schedule is shifted way early and therefore their breakfast is also shifted way early, right? So in the cases of these people, the early bird does not get the worm, it gets diabetes. I know. If you don't have fancy genetic testing like I have access to with IntelX DNA, which by the way, you can only access them if you go through a practitioner at this point. Another way to know if you are a night owl or not is just to not set an alarm, let your body wake you up naturally and see what time that is. Now, this is given that you don't have major sleep deprivation or major sleep issues, but your body should kind of cue you into whether or not it likes to wake up early or not. I know for me, if you let me sleep in, I usually sleep until more like 7:38. That would be my preference. And in fact, when I worked at a resort where I had to lecture after dinner, my work schedule ended up dictating my sleep schedule. So I ended up sleeping in, working out, not in the morning, but in the afternoon because of my work schedule. And I actually lost weight during that time in a way effortlessly. And I would say it was probably more aligned with my circadian rhythm, come to find out. Plus I was eating really good spot food. So I don't know, which one was it, right? By the way, all of this matters. If breakfast is good or not good for you does depend on if you're getting enough sleep. And so I did make a whole video on this. Go check it out. I'll link it over here. But sleep makes a big deal with how we process our food and how inflammatory or anti-inflammatory it is, plus our appetite regulation, etc. So I know that's a side topic, but it still does matter. All right, so the name of the game is personalization. You do you. If your rhythms are later, shift your sleep and your eating later. If your rhythms are earlier, shift it earlier, but try to follow the natural rhythm as much as possible. Many successful people are waking up late, starting their day more at like 10 or 11, and you know what? They're still successful and they're happy and their body is happy. So it's not like everyone needs to be waking up at 4 a.m., eating breakfast at the same time, 6 a.m., etc. Follow your own rhythm. At the end of the day, within 2 hours of waking, if you have adrenal issues, within 1 hour of waking, and make sure that sleep and eating cycle is as much attuned to your natural rhythm as possible. All right, now that we've talked all about when to eat breakfast, let's talk about what to eat. And this is where I get to share my wonderful, simple, quick and easy formula with you of how to make breakfast a metabolism boosting event of your day. All right, are you ready? Number 1, macros. This is where calories come from, fats, protein, and carbs. I have a simple, easy rule. It's called 30-30-30. Here we go. The first 30 stands for I want you aiming for at least 30 grams of protein at breakfast. There are some exceptions. Some people need more, some people need less, but in general, on average, 30. Number 2, 30 grams of carbs or less coming from unprocessed foods, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. The third 30 is a third of your calories of breakfast should come from healthy fats. Before I get into each of these macros, briefly, I do want to talk about micronutrients as well. My rule of thumb with these is I want you eating at least 3 vegetables at breakfast. You heard me, 3 vegetables, which is like 2 to 3 cups worth of vegetables ideally. I want you drinking at least 20 ounces of water upon waking at least 30 minutes before breakfast. If you drink too much water at breakfast, you will dilute your stomach acid and digest digestive enzymes and can cause indigestion. The other thing about breakfast that's super important in my formula is to get at least 10 grams of fiber in at breakfast. Now, fiber only comes from plants, so back to the vegetables, that's how you're gonna do it. Yes, you can add psyllium husk and chia seeds and other things that add fiber, but as much real food as possible. Lastly, if you want bonus points, you wanna aim for 5 colors on a plate at any given meal, breakfast included. And that comes from real plants, not green eggs and ham, just for the record. Let's talk about protein. I know it's a challenge to get enough protein into breakfast. You have to be super intentional, even me. So quickly, 30 grams of protein, how do we get that? 1 egg has about 6 grams of protein. 1 ounce of meat has about 7 grams of protein. This mouse is about 3 ounces, just as a reference point. That would be about 21 grams of protein right here. The other thing that adds protein to your meals would be things like nut butters. So 2 tablespoons of a nut butter is generally about 7 grams of protein. You also have things like your seeds, you also have things like your tofus and etc. So of course, protein powders and protein bars have their own grams as well. All right, so let me just give you my top hacks that I help my clients do in order to get that amount of protein in. Number 1, think savory. In most other countries in the world, breakfast is just another meal of the day. If you go to Asia, you're seeing they're eating bowls of noodles and stir fries and meats and vegetables alongside, just like any other meal, alongside condiments. And so it does not always have to look like our IHOP continental breakfast that we serve here in the US. I love using eggs. If you're not sensitive to eggs every other day, having 2 to 3 is not a bad idea. And again, you're getting like about 12 to 18 grams of protein from those eggs, but make it an egg scramble. Put in some meat in there, put in some vegetable, put in some healthy fat. One of my favorite is to do leftover salmon cut up with a bunch of veggies and adding some kimchi on top of that with an egg scrambled. So delicious. I also like using puddings, porridges as another way of getting your protein in by adding in protein powder, cutting up protein bars, or serving those things with nuts and seeds. So that would be your chia seed puddings, your grain-free cereals, hot or cold. I honestly love having chia seed with a protein bar cut up and a little bit of fresh fruit. Hashes. These are ground up meats with a bunch of veggies and herbs, and you can eat it like a stir fry, or you can wrap it in a grainless tortilla or a lettuce wrap, and they are great for breakfast. Lastly, leftovers. Sometimes I'll just heat up leftover soup that has a lot of veggies and some meat in it, and that is a really satisfying breakfast, especially in the winter. So again, think of breakfast as another way to get nutrition in. You only get like 3 opportunities in a day to get the calories and the nutrition in, so treat breakfast as one of those opportunities. When it comes to carbs, if you are a big cereal, oatmeal, pancake kind of person, yes, there are now grain-free, low-sugar versions of these things that potentially could still be a part of breakfast. I don't want you to overdo it, but you do want to look for, again, low sugar and low carb options. Now, the sugars that we like to see would be things like pure stevia, pure monk fruit, or allulose. These are my 3 sweeteners that I kind of reference for people right now. And there are a lot of cereals out there now that are grain-free, low in sugar, and overall are just a clean option if you still want to be using those. Ideally, you're using granolas and these cereals as more of a sprinkle on top of something versus eating a whole bowl of it. But here are a few brands to think of. 7 Sundays, Wella, Magic Spoon, Lovebird, 3 Wishes, and I do really like Julian Bakery Pro Granola as a low sugar grain-free granola as well. All right, when it comes to fats, it totally depends on your preference. I love using avocados, I love using olives and their respective oils. Yes, nuts and seeds can be a healthy source of fat as long as you're not overdoing them. And again, the fatty omega-3. Now, some people can tolerate dairy. Remember, dairy has more of the saturated fat. And if you think you're sensitive, the best way to find out is take dairy out completely for at least 4 weeks, ideally more like 6 to 8. And after that, put it back in, see if you're getting any symptoms returning. And so I know for me, I've shared this in other videos, I break out when I eat dairy, and the exception is when I'm in New Zealand eating like happy cow dairy. But for you, it could look like breakouts, it could look like bloating, it could look like headaches, it could look like water retention, like puffiness. I know for my husband, dairy makes him really congested, and so these are things you want to flush out if you want to include dairy or not in a meal like breakfast or in your diet in general. Bottom line is treat breakfast as a way to sync up your circadian rhythms, to allow your hormones to be on a good cycle, and also as a way to fuel your metabolism with macronutrients and micronutrients to get a jump start on the day. To sum it all up, I picked my top breakfast recipes in a meal planning app called Nourishing Meals. You do have to download a 7-day free trial to at least access my recipes that I've chosen on there. But once you access those, it's up to you whether or not you want to continue that subscription. I'll link my affiliate link down below for that membership. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to hear about how you got insane results by following my breakfast formula. And I can't wait to see you next time.